Today is January 6th. I am Rob. I'm an alcoholic, your friend here in the lifeboat of recovery, as we are reading through two bits of literature that really have just been monumental in my life. And that would be the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12. Yesterday we read the first 5 pages of Bill's story, and today we'll read pages 6 through 10. And yesterday we also read the introduction and the foreword to the 12 and 12. Today we'll just read the first page or so of step 1. So excited to be here with you again. And as I always say, I am not speaking on the behalf of AA or anybody else, any other organization. I'm just an alcoholic reading the books that mean a lot to me. And I hope that this will help at least one more person out there. But anyways, starting off with a little recap, Bill's story, we see that his progression in alcoholism has rapidly declined. And as I hinted around to you yesterday, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But there is light at the end of the tunnel if you'll just stay tuned. So with all that, we'll go ahead and jump into this. We're on page 6 of the 4th edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to begin with the first paragraph. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared to cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms. For mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's splendor purse when the morning terror and the madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window, or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back, as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared that I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. The doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day he found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge. But it wasn't. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I'd develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. They didn't need to tell me. I knew, and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who'd gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There'd been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I'd met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit, and then came the insidious sanity of that first drink. And on an Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere, or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted in what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected that there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through the night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wonder how he escaped. Of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time that we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of futility. The very thing an oasis. Drinkers are like that. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed, but curious. I wondered what had gotten into that fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply, but smilingly, he said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now, I suspected, a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yeah, the old boy was on fire, all right. But, bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But, he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. And there was that proffered temperance pledge that I had never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of such church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested that vast laws and forces are at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Okay, now for the 12 and 12, the first page of Step 1 on page 21. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol now became a rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency and all will to resist its demands. Once the stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. But upon entering AA, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps toward liberation and strength. Our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be the firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all of its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness he will find none at all. Proved beyond doubt by an immense experience, this is one of the facts of AA life. Okay, so we started off with step 1 there. One thing I really love about this, I love the line, our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be the firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. One thing that really stood out to me yesterday and today, on page 5, to backtrack a little bit about yesterday, this little paragraph right here, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. There's a lot of I there. There's a lot of willpower there. And I think Bill does a really good job of saying willpower wasn't enough. But then, in today's reading, on page 7, surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge. At least for him, self-knowledge wasn't enough. Finally, it looks like he's getting close to rock bottom when he says, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair that I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched out around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. This is a far cry from the guy who said I had arrived, isn't it? His friend, we'll talk a lot more about him tomorrow, but I think this is a good place to stop for now. All right. That's all we have for today, guys. We will read the rest of Bill's story tomorrow and a little bit more about step 1 in the 12 and 12. I am thrilled to be here with you in the lifeboat, and I will see you back here tomorrow.